In the prior video, I went through an example of how to set up your Moodle gradebook to match up with what's a fairly typical kind of approach that faculty often take with grading their courses. In this video, I want to talk about some additional points about adding items to categories in your gradebook and some points about what you can do with different point values on items. So just to recall, um, we have a fairly kind of standard grading schema here with a collection of quizzes, a collection of response papers, and then these items, midterm, final exam, and term project. And if you go into administration, click on gradebook setup, what we did was set up the quizzes as a grade category, response papers as a grade category, added a couple of grade items for the two exams that are going to be taking place in class, and added a Turnitin activity, assignment activity in Moodle for the term project, and set the aggregation method for the course to be weighted mean of grades so that we could use the weights corresponding to percentages. So I just want to say a couple of things about adding items to categories here. So for example, we are going to have quizzes be 15% of the grade. But I don't have to plan out at the beginning of the semester, oh, that means I'm going to have 7 quizzes and they're each going to be X number of points. Now that I've got this category set up, as the semester goes on, we can have quizzes, and all the quizzes can go into that category. And I've already told Moodle that it doesn't matter whether there are 7 or 27 quizzes in that category. Altogether, they're going to make up 15% of the grade. So this gives you some flexibility for setting things up, and then you can adjust, how many quizzes, how many response papers, and so forth you want to do as the semester goes on to make to do whatever makes sense for how you're working with your students as the semester goes on. So in the case of the quizzes, for example, you might be doing some quizzes in class. You might be doing some quizzes in Moodle. Same thing with the response papers. You might be collecting some response papers in class and grading them. And then other response papers you might collect as Moodle assignments so that you can view them ahead of class and provide some feedback, or at least get a sense for what students are struggling with before they come into class. So how do you handle those, getting those items into the categories that we've set up? Well, if there are things that are going to be done in class, you would add them in as grade items. If they are things that are going to be graded activities in Moodle, you'll set them up on the Moodle front page and specify what grade category you want them to go into. So let's add a few quizzes and add a couple of response papers. Let's say that we do the first 2 quizzes in class, and one happens to be an 8-point quiz, and another one happens to be a 10-point quiz. Let's make the other one an 11-point quiz for some reason. We can add those as grade items. So if I click Add Grade Item, and let's say in week 2 we did quiz number 1, and so just give it a name, and the maximum grade on that quiz was 8 points. So students got anywhere from 0 to 8 points on the quiz, and that's enough to create the item. But I actually want it to be not as a top level item in the course, but I want it to be in that quizzes category. So I click select quizzes here, click Save Changes, and now inside this bucket for the quizzes, there's quiz number 1. I can do the same thing to add quiz number 2, which maybe we did in week 3. And again, it was going to be out of 11 points. And let's say I forget to put it into the quiz category. If I leave this default, it's going to show up as a top level item. That's not a problem. If I click Save Changes, you see, oh, it didn't go into the category here because I forgot to specify that that's where it's going to go. that's showing up here as a top level item, you have two ways of moving it. One is you can select the item over here on the right hand side of the gradebook setup, and you can just tell it to move it into that quizzes category. Alternatively, you could click on the move icon next to the quiz item, and what Moodle will do is now provide you locations where you can move the quiz to. So if I click here just under quiz number 1 inside this container, that's where it's going to move to. Okay, so now I've got two quizzes in here, and they're both going to be making up part of that 15%. If I actually wanted to do a quiz in Moodle, I could go out to the front page of Moodle, and let's say, sometime during topic 2, in maybe in week 5, we're going to do a quiz in Moodle. You can just select the quiz activity, click Add. I'm just going to call it quiz number 3. And I won't go through all of the ins and outs of setting up a quiz, adding questions to it, and so forth, but I'm just going to add the activity. Want to note here that under grade, you can specify where the grade is, where the quiz is going to show up. And again, I want it in quizzes. And if I click Save and Return to Course, you will see that the quiz activity has been added to Moodle front page, but also if you go into the gradebook setup, you'll see quiz number 3 is in there as an item. By default, Moodle quizzes are 10 points when they're set up. You can adjust that. And I could do, say, quiz number 4. Again, we did that one in class, so I'm going to use a grade item. And this one, for some reason, I graded on a 9-point scale. Or let's say a 9-point scale. And again, I'm going to put it into quizzes, click Save Changes. You need to consider at this point how you want to have Moodle accumulate all of those different point values for the quizzes. By default, as we talked about last time, the default aggregation method for a category is simple weighted mean of grades. So in that case, Moodle takes the weight for the item from the total possible point value for the item. So in this case, quiz number 2 is actually more important than quiz number 1. It would contribute more to the quiz category weight because it's basically, the quiz number 1 basically has a weight of 8, quiz number 2 a weight of 11, quiz number 3 a weight of 3, quiz number 4 a weight of 9. If I don't want that, if I want all the quizzes to basically count the same, I can change the aggregation method. So again, if here is the quizzes category as this container, if I go over to the edit associated with the top of that container and say edit settings, you'll see here the aggregation options. There are lots of them, but I recommend faculty just worry about the top 3. Again, simple weighted mean of grades means Moodle is going to take the weights from the point values on the items, and items that have more points associated with them are going to count more. Weighted mean of grades we talked about in terms of setting up the overall grade categories. This would allow you to manually specify what the weights are, and they don't have to match up with the point values for the items. mean of grades is useful in this case. For example, for the quizzes, even though I'm using a different point value for the quizzes, that might just be because it's easier to grade the one quiz out of 11 points because I've got a question I want to grade out of 5 points and two questions I want to grade out of 3 points. So it turns out to be 11. But in my mind, a quiz is a quiz is a quiz, and I want them to count all the same. If you select mean of grades, then the point values don't contribute to the weight. They obviously contribute to the student's score, but all of the items in the category count the same toward the category total. So if I select mean of grades, click Save Changes, then even though this quiz number 2 is scored on a higher point value than quiz number 1, each one of these basically accounts 25% toward the quizzes category. Same thing with the response papers. I could say I'm going to collect the first response paper in class. And have it contribute to that category in the gradebook. And maybe I actually don't want it to be worth 100 points. So if I edit that, I'm going to score the first paper on a 10-point scale. And maybe the second paper is an assignment that I want to collect in Moodle. So again, I would go out to the front page of Moodle and add an assignment. Call it paper number 2. And here under the grading, say I'm going to make it be a 15-point paper. And it's also going to be in the response papers category. And click Save and return to course. And there is the assignment activity on the front page of Moodle. And if we go into the gradebook setup, then you can see here we have 2 papers. Again, the default is simple weighted mean of grades. For this category, maybe I do want to leave it simple weighted mean of grades. Maybe I want papers that are graded out of 15 points to be 50% more important for the grade category than the papers that I grade out of 10 points. I guess the last thing I want to mention here is that the ability to use either weighted mean of grades, as we're doing for the main top level categories and items, mean of grades or simple weighted mean of grades gives you flexibility. So for example, I know I want the midterm to be 20% of the course, so I give it a weight of 20 in the Moodle gradebook here. But I don't have to, I'm not required to have it be worth 100 points. Maybe I've got 32 multiple choice questions and 8 short answer questions that I'm grading on point values of 4 to 8 points, and an essay question, and if I add those all up, it comes up to 117 total points. That's fine. I can have the exam be worth 117 total points by editing the settings on that grade item. The scores that I will be entering, and we'll talk about how to get scores into the gradebook later, will be anywhere from 0 to 117 points. A student who gets 117 out of 117 obviously gets 100% on the midterm. It doesn't matter what this value is, whatever is most convenient for me to grade the exam, Moodle is going to treat it as 20% of the grade. So if you get comfortable with using the weighted mean of grades, the mean of grades, the simple weighted mean of grades, using categories and items to organize your Moodle gradebook, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you can set things up, and you're not locked into a very rigid, this item has to be 74 points so that my total grade point for the course adds up to 1,000. that kind of thing.